In Yoruba land, people say the river never forgets what is owed to it. It does not chase. It does not threaten. It simply waits with the patience of something older than memory itself. And when the time comes, it quietly collects. This is the story of Adunola, a young woman whose life was promised away before she was born, by a grandmother who believed one sacrifice could save an entire village. What if a promise your grandmother made before you were born became the debt you had to pay? In one Yoruba village, a young woman discovered that the river had been waiting for her all her life. Igbokun was a peaceful Yoruba village beside the sacred Omi River. The river was more than water. It was the village's lifeline. Fishermen prayed before every journey. Women whispered their secrets into its current. And elders taught that a generous river spirit named Omi River blessed the land with rain, fertile soil, and abundant fish. As long as the people honored her, the village continued to prosper. 40 years before Adunola's story began, disaster struck Igbokun. The rains disappeared, crops withered, and fishing nets came back empty. Hunger slowly settled over the village. One midnight, an elderly woman named Ijali walked alone to the river carrying offerings of palm wine, bitter cola, white cloth, and a white dove. Desperate to save her people, she prepared to ask the river for a miracle. Kneeling before the dark water, Ijali admitted she had nothing left to offer except one terrible promise. If her first grandchild was a girl, she would belong to the river when the time came. The river accepted without a single word. By morning, rain returned to Igbokun. The crops revived, the fish returned, and the village rejoiced. Only Ijali carried the burden of knowing what it had cost. Years later, Ijali's first granddaughter was born on a rainy Tuesday. Her parents named her Adunola, believing her birth had brought wealth and blessings to the family. That same year became the greatest fishing season anyone could remember. The villagers celebrated the child they believed was favored by the river. Only Ijali smiled through hidden sorrow, guarding a secret she could never reveal. Years later, Adunola grew into a gentle, thoughtful young girl who felt happiest beside the river. Whenever she needed comfort, she sat quietly at its edge, watching the water flow. Being near the river always felt strangely familiar, though she never understood why. The villagers affectionately called her a child of the river, believing it was simply because of her love for the water. They had no idea how true those words really were. As Adunola became a young woman, her quiet beauty caught everyone's attention. She sold fabrics and small goods in the village market, earning respect through honesty and hard work. She never noticed the admiring glances that followed her wherever she walked. While she focused on building a simple future, one young trader from another village had already made up his mind. He would win her heart, no matter how long it took. Taiwo came from a neighboring village to trade, expecting nothing more than good business. Then he saw Adunola. There was something about her quiet confidence that stayed with him long after she walked away. Unlike other men who admired from a distance, Taiwo simply decided to know her. Every visit to the market became another reason to stay, and every reason brought him one step closer to her heart. He began bringing small gifts, fresh fish, pieces of colorful fabric, sweet fruit from the market. Adunola accepted them politely, amused by his persistence but careful not to encourage him too quickly. Then one evening beside the river, Taiwo sat next to her and calmly declared, "I am going to marry you." She raised an eyebrow and smiled. "You have decided? But what exactly have I decided?" Love arrived quietly, the way the sunrise slips across still water. They talked beside the river every evening until laughter replaced silence and friendship became something deeper. Adunola found herself searching for him in crowded markets, while Taiwo could no longer imagine a future without her. Yet beneath their bare feet, the river stirred in strange ways, moving with a purpose neither of them noticed. The changes began gently. The current flowed against the wind. Strange dreams filled Adunola's nights with silver light and endless water. She woke with the scent of the river filling her room, though every window was closed. Taiwo listened patiently and assured her she was only frightened by her imagination. She wanted to believe him. Then, one evening, the river answered back. Unable to ignore the dreams any longer, Adunola sought the oldest woman in Igbokun. Aya Agba had served the river for more years than anyone could remember. Time seemed to move around her, instead of through her. She listened without interruption as Adunola described every dream, every strange feeling, every whisper carried by the water. When the story ended, the old woman asked only one question. "What was your grandmother's name?" she asked softly. "Iyali," Adunola replied. Silence filled the shrine. The old priestess closed her eyes before finally revealing the truth hidden for decades. Iyali had made a promise during the Great Drought. Adunola had been pledged to the river before she was ever born. The dreams were not warnings. They were a summons. That night, Adunola sat alone in darkness, unable to silence her thoughts. She remembered the grandmother she loved, never imagining that same woman had unknowingly chosen her future. She thought about Taiwo and the life they dreamed of together. Outside, the river flowed patiently through the night. Between love and duty stood a debt she had never agreed to car. With a heavy heart, Adunola tried to end their relationship. She begged Taiwo to forget her without explaining why. Instead, he insisted on hearing everything. When she finished telling him about the promise, the dreams, and the river's claim, he remained standing exactly where he was. "Your grandmother made that promise," he said firmly. "You never did. That cannot be your burden." Those words echoed farther than either of them realized. The very next morning, the Omi River rose higher than anyone had seen in 40 years. It did not flood the village, but it came close enough for every elder to understand its message. They gathered silently along the bank, watching the unusually high water with the uneasy respect reserved for ancient powers. The elders visited Adunola together. Their faces carried sorrow rather than judgment. They confirmed everything Aya Agba had revealed. The promise made by Iyali still stood before the river. Then they delivered the final warning. Adunola had 3 days to present herself alone at midnight. If she refused, the river would collect its debt another way, and the village would suffer the cost. On the final night, Taiwo stayed beside Adunola until dawn approached. Neither of them spoke much because words could no longer change what waited ahead. Finally, she told him she was choosing to go, not because she wanted to, but because innocent people should never suffer for another person's promise. Taiwo squeezed her hand gently. "That," he whispered, "is exactly why I love you." When midnight arrived, Adunola dressed entirely in white. Around her neck rested the coral beads her grandmother had once placed there with loving hands. Step by step, she walked toward the glowing river without hesitation. She was not fleeing danger, nor surrendering in fear. She was simply answering a call that had been waiting for her since before the day she was born. The river became perfectly still. Then the water lifted without a ripple. Before Adunola stood Omi River, ancient and magnificent, rising from the glowing current like moonlight given human form. The goddess spoke no words at first. She simply watched the young woman standing before her. For the first time in her life, Adunola faced the being that had quietly claimed her destiny. Adunola did not fall to her knees or beg for mercy. Instead, she lifted her head and spoke honestly. She acknowledged the promise her grandmother had made, but reminded the goddess it had never been her own choice. She asked not as payment, but as one woman speaking to another. She asked to be seen for who she truly was, not for a promise inherited. For a long moment, only silence remained. Then Omi River spoke with unexpected kindness. She explained that Iyali had come in desperation, while Adunola had come willingly, carrying nothing except truth. That honesty was more valuable than any promise ever offered. The goddess smiled gently. "The debt is released," she declared, and the river itself seemed to breathe with relief. Before disappearing beneath the water, Omi River offered one final blessing. The river would always remain part of Adunola's life, not as a curse but as a gift. She would forever understand its voice, and it would forever recognize hers. Then the glowing figure faded into the current. The river became peaceful once again, leaving Adunola standing beneath the quiet moon. At sunrise, Adunola walked back through dew-covered grass toward the village. Taiwo had remained outside her home all night, refusing to leave. The moment he saw her, he hurried forward and gently held her face in both hands. She smiled through tired eyes and whispered, "It is done." He asked nothing else. His embrace said everything words could never express. The people of Igbokun never forgot Adunola's courage. They learned that not every ancient debt demands endless payment. Sometimes truth carries greater value than sacrifice. Sometimes honesty can rewrite even the oldest agreements. From that day forward, parents told their children that the river remembers every promise, but it also recognizes the courage of those who stand before it with nothing except an honest heart. If Adunola's story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. Have you ever carried the weight of a decision someone else made before you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that freedom is sometimes found through honesty. Subscribe to Oja Tale Story. Turn on notifications and join us for another unforgettable African legend in our next story.